Hey everybody, Plushie here. Due to personal financial concerns, I have decided to skip this banner for this new Guda Guda event. Therefore, I would not be able to talk about these two servants in a hot take video. However, do not fret, we still have one servant that we can talk about, and I think she is really impressive, especially considering she is a free welfare servant. Today's topic of our hot take video is going to be about Himiko's adorable niece, Io. So as usual, we'll take a brief look at her skills, and I'll commentate on how I feel about them. So her first skill is a 3-turn 30% arts up, a 3-turn 50% anti-divine power mod, and also a 1000 curse damage against all enemies for 5 turns. Now this is a really decent skill. The 30% arts up is quite serviceable in terms of boosting her damage. It is also really important considering she is a looping servant, so it will contribute a lot to her refund. The 50% anti-divine power mod is pretty huge, and it will boost her damage by a sizable amount. It is also in the best form of this buff, because it not only affects her MP, it also affects her face cards, as well as it stacks really well with other buff types, as this type of buff is usually not present in a servant's skill set. And it'll be really apparent why this working on face cards is important to her when we look at her other 2 skills. The curse damage is nice, but there are other servants, even free ones and welfares, that do it better than her, so I really wouldn't consider this too highly. Her second skill is a 30 MP battery, as well as a 1-turn star absorb up on her arts cards, and also a 1-turn 100% arts crit damage up. This is very reminiscent of Himiko's battery skill. It's just a smaller battery, and with the buster effect swapped out for an arts effect. Now, as the Himiko skill does, it is a really decent 1-turn burst damage tool. 500% star absorb up on her arts cards paired up with a 100% arts crit up almost guarantees her to have a full-on crit turn with arts if you have any form of stars. The 30 MP battery is also really decent considering once again she is a arts looping servant, and any form of MP charge would be appreciated in those kinds of servants. So overall, really stacked skill. I'm quite surprised that it is basically a copy of Himiko's skill and none of the damage numbers are nerfed, considering she is a welfare. And finally, her third skill is a AoE 20% attack up for 3 turns, a 50% crit buff for all Wild Beast trait servants on your team for 3 turns, as well as a 10-star Star Bomb. Now this is once again a really stacked skill. The 20% attack up for all allies isn't that great. Honestly, I would have preferred it to be just on herself and the number is boosted up a bit, but it's still really decent as just an attack boost. The 50% crit up for 3 turns is really decent even if we only consider it to be on herself. And the additional buff ability to Wild Beast allies isn't really that relevant in my opinion, considering how narrow of a trait it is. It is even a smaller trait than the animal trait Koyan Dark buffs, and none of the servants has a lot of good synergy with Io in my opinion anyways. This is sort of the staple number for a lot of crit servants, even at the SSR rarity, stuff like Ibuki Saber, who also just has a 3-turn 50% crit up. And then finally, the 10-star Star Bomb synergizes really well with her second skill. She can just gain the stars, absorb the stars, and crit really hard with her arts cards. Her whole skill set is a pretty decent crit skill set, I would say, for arts cards, and the numbers are not stingy at all. You have 50% for 3 turns, 100% for a single turn on top of that, and also a 50% anti-divine P mod. So when you combine all of these things and she's fighting divine enemies, her face cards is gonna hit real hard. So yeah, I am really impressed with her skill set overall. Some of her more notable passives are the 8% arts up. It's both a damage boost and a refund boost. It's always appreciated on an arts looping servant. Her passive that she shares with Himiko that prevents her from being poisoned and burnt, which is niche but is useful against bosses that like to spam these kinds of effects. And finally, her third passive that gives her a small quick boost but also makes her a Wild Beast trait servant. It is no difference than simply letting her have the Wild Beast trait, but I think this is more of a lore reason rather than a gameplay reason. But overall, having this Wild Beast trait makes her third skill extremely good because it does function on herself. Finally, let's take a look at her MP. Her MP is a AoE 4-hit Arts MP. It increases her own MP damage by 10% for 3 turns before damage. This effect is really similar to Space Ishtar, meaning that her MP damage scales up, obviously not to the extent of Space Ishtar. The MP also inflicts evil curse status for 3 turns to all enemies by 100%, and the overcharge effect is further inflicting curse on all enemies from 1000 to 3000 according to overcharge. Now this is a really good MP. It kind of loops worse than some. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. But it is also a scalable MP, just like I mentioned earlier, like Space Ishtar. So on wave 3, her MP damage is actually going to have a 30% MP damage up, which is pretty relevant in terms of damage. The curse and evil curse is once again okay, but I feel like there are other units that does it better than her. If you don't have these units and you still want to play curse memes, she does work. But I wouldn't say it was an amazing effect. It's just serviceable for some very niche use. So when talking about EO, I think there are a couple of aspects we can talk about. First and foremost, she is a AoE arts looper welfare. Obviously, her refund doesn't come close to some of the insane ones we've gotten in the past, such as Sieg and Assassin Valkyrie. EO's refund is just serviceable. She can loop on most classes with double Castoria, Black Grail 2k4. But she is going to struggle against Assassins and Berserkers, where you need to use a plug suit to plug in someone like Shufu, or you need to bring a 50 MP start CE like Ocean Flyer. But in my opinion, what EO lacks in refund, she makes up for in damage. Here are some of the calculations I've done for all the AoE 4-star welfares art servants we've gotten, and this is assuming double Castoria, no CE. And EO does the highest damage out of all of them if we don't consider any counter trade. She's even outclassing characters that I don't expect her to outclass in terms of damage, such as Ramaru, who is a Avenger. You know, you always expect Avengers to have the highest damage. So obviously if you're doing specific class nodes and you have the counter class, you'll probably still bring the counter class. But if you're fighting something that, you know, you only have neutral against, I would really think EO could be the best choice. She has a scalable MP reminiscent of Space Ishtar, as I've said earlier before, and she has just generally really high damage. Divine is a hard trait to hit during farming, but even without Divine, she does really okay damage in terms of arts looper. She's gonna outclass most of your low MP AoE arts, 4 stars, even some 5 stars. So yeah, really amazing looper in my opinion. Even though her refund isn't the greatest, she has the damage to back it up. Outside of looping, she also has really strong crit game. As I've mentioned before, she has a really impressive crit skill set. The skill set almost looks like it belongs to an SSR servant even. None of the damages are being cut down. She has the very solid 50% crit up for 3 turns and the 100% on top of that for a single turn. She has the really high star absorb to pair with it as well. You know, low downtime on the 3 turn crit up. Only 5 turn cooldown, so you don't have 2 turns of downtime. Comes with a star bomb and a 50% anti-divine on her skill 1 as well. All of this combining would make her a insane boss killer, especially facing divine servants. I have tried her against Kama Mara, and she does insane amounts of damage with her face cards, and this is what I really like about this servant. She isn't just a AoE arts looper that you use before you eventually replace her with some SSR. She's also a really strong anti-divine DPS. If you don't have the specific servants to do it, EO is going to be your best friend when you're fighting divine enemies. She's going to crit super hard and not just do high MP damage, which is, yeah, I really like that aspect of her. She is a really impressive crit servant with solid skill sets. You should definitely invest in her. Her skills are also easy to level up if you have had farmed a couple of lottos before, because it's only skill gems instead of actual materials. So yeah, definitely recommend getting her skills up. Really good skills. And then finally, we can talk a little bit about her curse aspect. She isn't the best, but it isn't bad either. Sometimes you want a high base curse damage instead of high evil curse, and she does provide that with her skill 1 combined with high OC versions of her MP. She can give up to like 4,000 base curse, so when you multiply it by a big number, the number is bigger than someone who doesn't really give that much curse on base. So it's okay, but I really wouldn't consider it her major function, considering her other 2 functions are so much stronger than this. So all in all, there wasn't much to talk about Io. She's just overall a really solid servant. She's a decent looper with pretty high damage compared to her peers, as well as a really good crit DPS with a really solid skill set. I think for people who can't afford to roll anything for this banner, they would definitely not be disappointed that you got this really stacked free servant to play around with, and especially considering she also has a costume, so that's an adorable plus as well. So anyways, hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I'll see you guys in the next one.